I felt like our morning went really well. And we are just going to kind of continue on with providing services to a little bit of an underserved community. I saw Holly was on the agenda for a national conference. I was like, wait, we know her. Why don't we have her speak? And so Utah County has been doing really great things with their Housing First program. And so in the next 3 hours, we have invited Holly, and she has brought Heather along, and we're going to just turn the time over to them.
Thank you so much. I'll start out and then we'll have a break, and then we'll hear from Heather. Hogue is in the back and you'll meet her. She's an amazing person that shares our passion for housing instability with survivors of domestic violence. It's a quote that we like to use, but I want to tell you a tiny bit about myself if you don't know me. I'm been working in the field of victim advocacy for over 30 years. I worked in Wyoming, Green River, Wyoming, Rock Springs, anyone? Yeah. I worked for a YWCA for about 12 years. And then I moved to Tooele County, and they had just wrote a grant for a victim advocate in the prosecution office. And so I was able to do that for many years. And then we moved to Utah County, where I worked a little bit at the Provo Police Department for a while, and then I worked in Saratoga Springs Police Department as the victim advocate, because that's where I live and it's super close to my house. So I was just like all of you. I went to renew my VOCA grant 5 years ago, and at the grant meeting, they told us about this housing program that would be so amazing. It was new nationally and new in Utah. It was housing first, survivor driven model like we use with homeless populations, and it would be specifically for victims of domestic violence. We also serve, actually I would use the term domestic violence a lot, but we do serve victims of sexual assault as well, and other types of victimization too. The majority is domestic violence that we serve, but that's what I'm going to kind of use. So that's how it came to be. When I heard about the funding, I met with some other advocates in Utah County, and we talked about how we're going to get this funding in our county. And we thought the best thing would be to come out of the nonprofit agency in our county so that we could use it for everyone throughout the county. So I called the director. I happen to know him. It used to be called the Center for Women and Children in Crisis. And he said, yeah, I'm interested. And I said, I'll come over and help you because I'm so excited about it. It made so much sense to me. And as I was working with him on it, we flew over to Boulder, Colorado to look at an agency that had the funding, and they gave us all their information. They said it was working wonderfully. So as we were writing it, it's one of those things where I just couldn't let go. I don't think I'm controlling or anything like that, but I couldn't, I said, I gotta come over and do this project because I love it so much. So that's where I went. Is over to, we have a name change. We're called the Refuge Utah, and we are the nonprofit domestic violence sex assault agency in Utah County. So we have the emergency shelter, we have the sex assault response team, and now we have outreach housing services, is what we have. I'm gonna, oh yeah, this tells you about where we started 5 years ago. So it was just me and one funding source, VOCA funds we started out with. And silly me, I thought it would be just a chill job with just me and one source. And my wonderful colleagues from Utah County remember how I thought, I'll just be an advocate with a rent check to give you. That's going to be fun. It was amazing. Just a few months into it, I started going home crying because it was overwhelming, because we also are mobile and it was just me. I'm running all over. The demand is great. So we've evolved to now we have about 7 funding sources or 8. We have served so far to date 1,700 survivors of crime, and last year we expended over $700,000. We have 3 full-time people, part-time Spanish case manager, and we also use interns also. So huge demand. So what I hope today is that wherever you're housed, working in victim advocacy, you will see a connection with where you are and housing. So I want to ask you this question. I know many of you go to crisis scenes or you work with victims shortly after a crisis. How many of you have been to a crisis scene and you're trying to deal with the criminal justice process? Maybe there's an arrest, maybe there's injuries, there's kids crying, police are trying to make an arrest, you're working with the victim, and they say to you, but where am I gonna live? Does that ever happen? Okay. Over here, big thing, yes. Provo, yes, right? So really, for 25 years, I was in the same boat. I was, everyone has a brochure, right, with your services. And on the back, you probably have something that connects people to long-term housing assistance or something like that. So for years, I would just be referring people like, I don't know where you're gonna live. I don't know what's gonna happen. I don't know who's gonna pay your rent, that kind of thing. So we'll talk a little bit more, a little bit later about exactly how we do that. And we're gonna talk about some of the funding sources, but we really, Heather and I are gonna show you ways that you can connect in your community with housing people, maybe people that have housing or options, or you can get together and collaborate and get some funding. This is a huge issue. I want to say, I was going to ask Rochelle this before we started, that this, and Vicky, the survey that we did, was that 3 years ago? Time just flies. Okay. So I love that survey so much. I love to bring it up because I thought it was amazing. The response, there was this survey sent out, if you're new to this business, I guess I'll say, sent out to service providers and victims themselves. I thought it was amazing that victims themselves told us one of their biggest concerns is housing, lack of housing. Yeah, they're talking about the criminal justice system, safety planning, prosecution, of course, but they're saying housing, where am I gonna live? What am I gonna do? So it's a huge problem, we know. We'll talk more about funding sources later, but before I forget, I wanna throw something out. We do some federal funding sources, local sources, we'll take money from anywhere, but just as a kind of a cool side note, TJ Maxx opened up a new store in Utah County, and they had a little thing where you could apply for a little grant from them. And so we did, and they just gave us $10,000. It just happened a couple weeks ago, so it's kind of on my mind. So think about the rent you could pay for victims you serve, maybe pay a deposit to get a new place for some rent. I mean, every little bit definitely adds up. In the first couple of years, I worked with someone named Lindsay, and you're going to hear from her in a minute. And she had written me such, it was a profound statement of how housing assistance enabled her to flee from the domestic violence relationship that she was in. And so I asked her to do a little video for us so you could hear from her how assistance was. What should I push to play, Maddie? Should I push? Oh, here we go.
My name's Lindsay, and I'm a survivor of domestic violence. I was with my abuser for just under 20 years, and we share 3 children together. I suffered physical abuse, emotional abuse, verbal abuse, and sexual abuse, all in my marriage. During my marriage, my ex-husband would lock my keys in a safe when I would get home from work if he didn't take me himself. Our children were pulled out of public school and homeschooled. I was the only one employed, and my paychecks were going into a bank account that I didn't even have access to. My name was not listed on that bank account, and I had no way to access those funds. I tried to leave my abuser in 2019 when he was arrested, and due to the lack of support and a place for me and my kids to go that was more permanent, I ended up going back to my abuser. And once I returned to him, I almost lost my life 3 times that year. My children witnessed this abuse and had to participate in jury trial with me. And when he was arrested the final time, luckily, my victim's advocate got me in contact with someone at the refuge. Not only were they able to come and show me incredible support and love and bring basic needs that me and my kids needed, but they were able to get me and my children a place to call home within 6 days of my husband's arrest. I know without a doubt in my mind that us having a place where we could heal and be together is the only reason that I was successful in staying separated from my abuser. I know that that is a major risk, just leaving and knowing that you don't have somewhere stable to go and hoping that you're going to find somewhere to land. And places like the refuge help victims of domestic violence in moments when they feel broken and weak and like they don't deserve help. And the refuge showed me that I do deserve help and I do deserve a better life. And that's what they helped me get.
So when we got in contact with Lindsay, like she said, she had tried to leave 6 months prior, and then she ended up in the hospital with stitches and injury. So she was afraid to leave again. Like she said, she didn't have access to her bank account, so she couldn't figure out where she gonna stay, but she had finally decided to do it again. And when I got in contact with her, she had packed up her things, but she really literally had nowhere to go. So she would be, who you would say that's the face of homelessness. She was literally homeless. But if you hear her, would you think to yourself, that's typically a homeless person that you would see? You wouldn't necessarily think that, but when you hear more about her story or what she was experienced, then you understand how homelessness for domestic violence survivors is sudden. It could be sudden. She has a job. She couldn't get to her money. And then her money was limited. She had signed up for long-term housing assistance, and there were just a lot of things that we worked with her about, but she wasn't able to get. So she had written me a quote that I was telling you I liked it so much. I sent it to UOBC when we did our grant reports. I said, I really think you need to read this quote because it will show you how impactful housing assistance can be for survivors. It made the difference of her being able to leave. And I think they sent it on federally to the federal top of VOCA administration, and they appreciated reading it too, that they could see a quote from somebody that experienced housing assistance. And Lindsay is now on our board of directors, so she's a person with lived experience helping guide our board of directors into get funding, obtaining funding, and her voice is really valuable. So, okay. So I know that all of you are experts in domestic violence, and so we all kind of know the situation or what are some of the difficult things, but they're kind of unique barriers, and we'll kind of just go through some. Does anybody ever work with somebody with poor credit or ruined rental histories? Anybody, everybody, right? Because I think we focus a lot on physical abuse, emotional abuse, stalking, and then, financial is kind of in there because because you're usually dealing with the other abuse too, but doesn't it seem to go hand in hand? I mean, a lot. Steady employment, sometimes also, have you worked with people that have come to Utah to start over? They came for a better life. They thought it was gonna improve their relationship because they were in a new place now. And if the domestic violence wasn't addressed, usually that's still going on. I don't know if you've experienced, I've just experienced that a lot lately, it seems like, but, or missing work, things like that, harassment. And then, discrimination. So has anybody worked with somebody that the police have been called so many times to their apartment, the landlord is gonna try to evict them, right? Okay, and we have more information a little bit later about that. I have a handout that might help you on that, but that's common. And you can understand that landlords, it's, you know, they're like, what's gonna happen over here? The police keep coming, I don't know what to do, it's a big mess. So that's one thing. Also a loss of subsidized housing. I have someone right now that she was in her own apartment. She has a housing voucher, but the abuser keeps coming and he's portraying that he lives there, so that's causing her a violation of her Section 8 housing. So she's getting evicted even though he doesn't live there, but he's telling them that he does. So those are some of the things. So our housing stability program, what I was telling you about the Housing First model is this is what we patterned our housing program on. Viewing housing as a basic right. I mean, everyone has the right to live in a safe, secure place. And then treating survivors with respect, warmth, and compassion, of course. You know, working with people as long as they need. So those kind of basic things. And these are some of the 4 main pillars of the model. So meeting survivors where they're at. So, you know, who's an expert on their victim situation? The victim, right? In all aspects, really. But especially with housing, where are they? What do they need? What's their current situation? What's going on? I work with somebody who is chronically homeless, a survivor of domestic violence. And it's a challenge to meet her where she's at because it changes sometimes. But what we ended up doing that she wanted to do is she wanted to live in a trailer park, and our funding is so flexible that we're able to pay for the lot rental at the trailer park where she is. So that works for her. She didn't want to go to an apartment. She didn't want to do, that was her thing. So finding out what people want and where they're at is super important. We do safety planning with people. And then, this is what I wanted to say. The mobile advocacy piece is a game changer, right? So people that we work with in our housing program, they don't ever have to come in. They don't have to come and meet with us in our office. We can go to them anytime. And I think about wherever you're housed as a victim advocate, maybe you have the ability to also do that, to go out to people. And you might think, well, why would I be going out to them for housing? But what if they just needed help with an application for long-term housing? Could you possibly go pick it up from them and go drop it off at the housing authority? Just that simple thing could mean the difference of them getting a housing voucher faster than they wouldn't. I'll be honest, all these years I've been a victim advocate, you know what? I was never focusing on housing. And this has been just eye-opening for me, how it all goes hand in hand, you know, that advocacy can include housing assistance. Because I was of the mindset of, go over here, go to this agency, I have no idea if they can help you, I have no idea what their application looks like, but here you go, there you go. And I would feel a little bit helpless myself, because I wasn't really addressing that. So anyways, we're super mobile. We found out that the majority of victims we work with, they need that. We meet people sometimes at their lunch hour in the parking lot of their work, maybe to do an application or deliver a check or pick up a check, something like that. So the mobile part is huge when you're talking about housing. And then we try to be trauma informed, of course, you know, facilitate the connections as much as we can, going with people, talking to them about agencies. One thing that happened to us during COVID is our county, like all counties, got some emergency rental assistance. Did everybody get that? Ours came through Community Action Program. And so we were like, great, if we can't help them, we can refer them there. So we're referring people, and when people are telling us, well, it's not working, or I don't understand it, I don't know what it's about. And I thought, after we hear a few people say it, we go, okay, what's going on? So I send a mobile advocate to their office. And that was when we were, gosh, I think had to go in the parking lot. Remember those days? Kind of, well, I think it was beyond the mask, like you had to be in the parking lot. Seems like a long time ago, doesn't it? So she was trying to understand the process. So she came back with the application. I said, oh, okay, we got it. She goes, no, we don't got it. It's super hard. It's confusing. We don't get it. So then we had to have more meetings so we could figure out how to connect people. So I think that's one thing we can do too as victim advocates. If you're going to give a resource, try to find out how it works. What's the best practice on it? And maybe the agency that you're going to be sending them to isn't well versed in working with victims. And so maybe that's an area you could help them with as well. And then we have super flexible funding, which I absolutely love. Some of the things we've been able to do are amazing. What we try to do is rental related assistance. So what will help someone's ability to pay rent. One time I had a survivor that was living, you know, homeless, living in her car, and she was a professional seamstress, and she was thinking if she could just get a machine, an industrial machine that she could use, she could continue her business and she could fully support herself. So she was looking for a room to rent. So traditional government long-term housing assistance usually is not going to cover a room for rent in a place, or maybe like well, I guess they could have a basement apartment, but sometimes not. So she was able to find a room, and then we had funding to help her purchase the machine. So I didn't actually pay for her rent. We purchased the machine so she would be able to work and then be self-sufficient herself. So that's how flexible we can be. We can do different things to get people housed. I'm trying to think of another example, but that's one I like to use a lot, is think outside the box and look for funding. So when we're looking at those or some of the funding sources, like I told you, the TJ Maxx source, that doesn't have a lot of strings attached like government funding does. So that's why I love those type of things. Like, we're accountable, we have receipts and we have policies and procedures, but we can fit in odd things sometimes that you wouldn't normally see. We've definitely helped with car repairs, so get people going to work. Of the victims you serve, does anyone ever have transportation issues? For those online, there's a big, every table, right? So what are we gonna do about that, you know? Well, we have a thing in our county, we work very close with our mountain land government, and they have transit passes with UTA that we can get for victims. It's a long-term pass that actually has their ID on it. And so we can work on those kind of things. But, you know, Utah County is spread out. I think all of Utah is spread. Does everyone agree it's kind of spread out? It's not like you're in a big city where you have public transportation all over the place. No, you got to drive. So that's difficult. That's a difficult thing with housing too. I mean, if someone can't drive in their application somewhere, or they have no gas or things like that, we gotta look at all that too, because it connects to housing. And then partnerships with housing providers and community. We're gonna talk a lot about this with Heather, because we partner with so many people that help us provide housing, that's the key, is how can we do that? So we'll definitely be working on that too. Also, I wanted to say, if anyone has any questions or comments as we go, please jump in. I'm pretty casual, so yeah, yes.
I have one. Are you familiar with the Good Landlord program?
I'm not sure. We have a good landlord program.
Most cities have them.
Oh,
And what it is, so as a rental, so you're a landlord, it's falls under business license.
oh,
So if I was an individual and I had, say, just my house, to get the discount, it may or may not break the bank. But when you're looking at apartments, so if you're non-participating, some of the fees can be $100 per unit. So when you're looking at, if they're not participating, they have 1,000 units at $100 a pop, that's $100,000. But if you're looking at where the cities, if you participate in the Good Landlord program, then they can reduce it to like $10 per unit, and which is $10,000. Well, that's $90,000 that a landlord's gonna say, you know what, I'm gonna evict you because you are draining public, your police services. And I think that's something that you may want to look into, because that's probably a huge hurdle, because they're a business. So, and
is it like
I-
something landlords can join?
Yeah,
Oh,
so
okay,
it's,
voluntary.
so yeah, it's voluntary, but if either
Private
way,
landlords,
private,
landlords.
yeah, like apartment complex, any rental
Oh,
unit.
mhm.
So if I'm, put my business hat on,
Mhm.
if I evict you, I save $90,000.
Hmm.
Because if I have so many call outs in a amount of time, they can kick me off the Good Landlord program, and I'm gonna have to pay
Oh,
that $100 a whack.
okay, that's very interesting.
Yeah.
The Good Landlord program.
Yes.
I don't know it. This is one project that has come to pass that we're super excited about because of our collaborative partnership with our housing authorities. How does everybody connect with your housing authorities in your areas, or you know of them, of course? But you gotta connect with them. You gotta sit by them at something. Anyways, we have such a great partnership with them and with our, we'll talk more about our COC and with Heather, but so our Provo City Housing Authority purchased 16 two-bedroom apartments, and they're letting us put survivors in them, all of them. There's no wait list. It's just coming from us only. And then it's a permanent supportive housing program. So we do provide ongoing case management for the tenants that are in there as long as they need, and they can stay there as long as there is needed. So it's an amazing program, and we're just doing it. We're in the middle of it. We have about 10 of the units rented right now, and we're working on the rest, and we're finding out a lot of cool things about it. So the housing authority, it's basically the person who have a Section 8 voucher, and that's who pays the rent. And then the tenants, if they are working, they could pay a small portion of rent too. And then we help with just everything we can think of. We help them at the lease signing. We help with that whole application process. We gather their documents. We send the housing authority the whole package. So we try to make it easy on the housing authority too. It's been a phenomenal project that's helped some survivors break free from their abusive relationship, having a place to go. So I have one person that's you know, she's there, she's breaking out of the abusive relationship, but she's doing it, her safety planning is including going to this apartment unit because it's an unknown place for the abuser. And we're already talking about how's he gonna react, he's gonna be super mad. So we're kind of working that out on how to do that. Yeah, Marcia.
I have a question from the chat,
Oh, sure.
and Kristen wants to know, does a person who is an immigrant qualify for housing? To have that labor?
But for our agency, for the Refuge Utah and our housing assistance, absolutely, you don't have to have documentation, absolutely. We're super low barrier. So if I have someone that does not have legal status and they find an apartment, lots of private landlords have no problem with that. We will definitely pay the rent. We have no problem. Now, the housing authorities with Section 8 housing, they do have to be, they have to have someone in their household that has citizenship. Okay, it could be a kid. But yeah, that's true. For this particular project, someone in the house has to have citizenship. So, but for our program to basically help you with a couple of months rent or something like that, which I don't, you know what, I'm sorry, I don't think I have that slide up, but so our outreach housing program at the Refuge, we'll do typically a month of rent where you're at. We can do sometimes up to 3 months. And we do deposits. If you want to get into a new place, we'll do deposit and rent, that kind of thing. And for us, it's a very simple, we have an assessment that we use. We call it an assessment. I think that's a very friendly word, but we try to make it very low key. They just have to answer some basic questions. We just determine that they're a victim. They don't have to have reported the crime. And then we go from there, and we're super fast because we're in a nonprofit, so we're not constricted by you know, we have an accountant that's there every day. So one of the fastest ones I've done was actually a Provo case where there was an arrest at night, and you know, the victim, it was the end of the month, she didn't know how she was gonna pay her rent. You know, it was, I think it was due like right then. And so I talked to her in the morning about 10 o'clock and I said, can you just text me a picture of your lease, every page of your, she goes, yeah, sure. She texted me the picture. I came around 2 o'clock that afternoon and I drove right up to her place and I handed her the rent check. Like we're that fast usually. Usually I don't tell people that fast. Usually I say, give me a day. Give me a couple days actually. But we're very fast on that kind of assistance. So coming out of the nonprofit is very helpful for that. I mean, maybe you could have a government agency, but I don't know. What do you guys think? I think it might take a while. Yeah. So in Utah County, that is unique. When we decided to start this outreach housing program, we're working with all the victim advocates in law enforcement in our county. And that was really the consensus of everyone that if the Refuge could manage those funds and assist everyone in the county, that would probably be the most effective way. So that's what we do. We have very wonderful collaboration with all our law enforcement advocates in Utah County and in prosecution as well. And so we get referrals from, the majority of our referrals come from those agencies. I don't think I talked about that before. So, yeah, that's just that one project. So that's just kind of one thing we're doing. I mean, we hope to do more of that as well. Oh yeah, so now what? Now what are we gonna do? Talked about housing a little bit and some of our stuff. Because what I wanted to talk, I want to make sure that you know that there's just so many things you could do no matter where you're housed. And I think that's a new way of looking at it, thinking about it, because we do some statistics, of course, for grant funding. And one of the questions I get asked on this one funding is if we prevented homelessness. So think about all the victims you work with. If they were able to get, like the one I just told you, that we paid her rent where she is, so that gave her 30 days to think about what she wanted to do next. Did she want to stay there? Does she want to maybe increase her hours at work or get a job, or does she want to move somewhere else? Instead of going to a traditional shelter, which our shelter is always full, I don't know about where you all are, but ours is always full. It's small. This was a way for her to be safe for 30 days and think about, you know, what she wanted to do. So it's kind of a different way to think about how to keep people safe where they're at. I hope that makes sense with that. So these are some things that we've done with our housing program, and some things that I think anybody can do. And I'm going to show you some other stuff too. But you know, I think, yeah, when I started the project, so it was just me and a cell phone. I was thinking about it, like, what am I gonna do? Like, who's gonna refer people? I knew all my friends and advocates in law enforcement agencies, they would refer people, but I started looking at my community and thinking about who would want to refer people to us. And this has opened the door for us to go out in the community and give presentations. Talked about like landlord associations or the program that you were talking about, but I know there are also real estate associations, landlord associations, those kind of things, and talking to them. I had a victim that had a Section 8 voucher and she could not find a place to live because poor credit, poor rental history, those are huge obstacles. And so we were trying all kinds of different things. Well, she came across a private landlord, and this was a management company run by women. And I'm just saying because that's what they were, not that they were more sympathetic, but they really did listen to her and they were willing to give her a chance and rent to her. And so then they were our top management company. So we kept sending people to their properties because we knew that they would work with them and they would give them a chance. And they also knew that we would support them and help them as long as we possibly could. Yeah. Let's see, what else is. So I was talking about that. Make sure you know what is available in your area and what you can do. How about when you do a fundraising event or a DD or sex assault awareness, do you invite the housing authorities to that typically? Right? No, I do now, yes. They're our best friends. So why not though? They want to come and then offer to come to their staff meetings and give a presentation. I think that would be really good. Also advocate directly with landlords and property managers. I'm sure you all have experience with that. I was working in the police department and a victim lived in the apartments right behind the police department. There was a protective order, the landlord, they weren't gonna honor it. They didn't care. I forget if it was she needed to move or what it was, but I was just so frustrated. So I just walked over there to talk to the property manager and I go, really, like, what do you, this is impossible what you're expecting from her. This is a protective order, impossible. And so, you know, I just think just going over there, they said, oh, okay, well, we'll call our national people or whatever, it was a national conference, and they'll get that waived so that she could, I think it was for her to get out of the lease. So they did it, but I mean, don't be afraid to advocate for them or to write a, if someone gets turned down for an application for an apartment complex, don't be afraid to write the email and say, well, of course, get the victim's permission, but you know, I've done that before and said, is this okay with you if I write that you've experienced financial abuse because of your past relationship, and this is why it's what it is, and would they please give you a chance? So, you know, don't be afraid to speak up on their behalf or something like that. Also, share your statistics, because if people are doing other housing projects or building things, they might want to know what is going on in the county. If you're sitting here, if you're looking at your statistics and you have 100 victims in a quarter and 75 of them had housing issues, that's a good stat to share with your community partners. I was mentioning that our shelter at the Refuge Utah is small and it's always crowded. And we are in the process of building another shelter. We're in the beginning process, but the land is being purchased and we're working on it, and it's going to be I think I can safely say it's going to be in Orange City. Well, what happens in any community when people hear, let's build a shelter in your community? What and over there, someone's like, no. No, not in my backyard. You ever hear that? Okay, so now here we are advocating for that, right? So it had to go before the city council, right? The Orange City Council. And so one of the council people, they decided to ask the victim advocate in their police department, who they knew privately, just kind of, casually, like, hey, what do you think about that shelter? Is that really necessary? And guess what? She said, well, yes, it is. I refer people there all the time. It's always crowded. We need it badly. She had some stats. My last quarter was a lot. And she said, yes, there's so many people that could use a shelter. So anyways, sharing your stats is really important. So before we had our outreach housing program, our statistics for our agency were mostly focused around our shelter and our crisis line. So now, after 5 years, we can provide some seriously good statistics on how many victims just needed rental assistance. Maybe they didn't need to go to the shelter. It's a different way of thinking about it. Lots of times victims are safe staying where they're at, or they have gotten into a new place that's unknown by the abuser, and now they can keep their kids in their school that they have, they can continue to work, or whatever it is. So thinking of shelter as the only safe place for victims, I think we're all moving past that. I think 30 years ago, I think we would have said shelter is the only option, and now we're seeing that because victims know what's best for their situation, that there's other options that are good. So that's good. This is in our county. Now let's say you have a victim that has obtained a Section 8 voucher, a long-term housing voucher. Now they need to go out on their own and find an apartment or a place to rent, okay, a rental unit. And they need, if it's a private landlord, they might need to tell them how great it would be if they would accept a Section 8 voucher. So in our county, we helped work as a group in our COC, which we'll talk about a little later, to develop this brochure that you would give a landlord to tell them. It's not, it is a process, there's some stuff, but it's not bad, and we'll help you. I've sent this out many times to landlords who call and ask me, why should I accept someone here who's getting a voucher? And one of the selling points is you'll always get your rent and some other things too, like there's your benefits, tenants are pre-screened, you're going to get your rent, there's low turnover and vacancy, that's true. Anyways, and it tells the landlord what they can do and the paperwork that's required. So we came in as the domestic violence sexual assault provider, helping put the information into the brochure that would also help the victims that we serve. And just real quick, I want to talk, just kind of interject on sex assault survivors. This was a surprise to me too, because I was just thinking I'll be mostly working with DV victims, which I do, but we get a lot of referrals from our sex assault program. We have in Utah County 2 colleges that are universities that are big. There's a lot of students, and just for an example, if a sex assault happens to a student and they're in student housing or something like that, maybe it happened in their house or in the hallway or something like that, they might want to move. We have easily been able to assist them to move into a different unit or a different place, or just they might feel unsafe where they are. Maybe the perpetrator has followed them home, something like that. So that, I wasn't thinking of that when we first started our housing program of how we would serve those victims as well. And then we try to immerse ourselves in housing stuff, and this was an awesome booklet made by, I think it's the Utah Housing Coalition. Okay, we use this all the time. Because you guys get calls from victims that say, I'm having a problem with my landlord, I don't know what to do. No matter where you're housed, in a prosecution office or law enforcement, because you're there, you're a victim's advocate. They come to you with different needs, like I need maybe emergency food, I need utility help, or things like that. And so usually I would say, I don't know what to do, but this booklet is amazing. It's actually online. I have a few copies here today too, and it's written in Spanish and looks like another language too. And it actually gives you the resources and super helpful tips on what to do with landlord disputes, that kind of thing. Also, if you have a victim that this is their first apartment or they're new to renting, it actually gives very good tips. And we put the back page of the booklet, it's kind of big, but it's about like this. But we love the back page. Pay your rent, seriously, always pay your rent. No, really do it. Remember, pay your rent. But it just gives people really good ideas on renting and what kind of thing. Their rights, gives renters rights, things like that. So that's a good one too. And then everyone knows this is kind of new on victim rights and rental rights, lease termination and locks changes. Everybody up on this, and this comes from UDBC. Made this. It's a one page. I think we have some copies of it too. So we kind of cut the page in half. But this is really good for victims that are coming to you saying that they're being evicted unlawfully and what they can do about it. I've been asked to pay the termination fee, which would be 1 month of rent. So that's something I definitely would look at. If I could help a victim pay that termination fee, maybe they could go on to a safer place. So something like that. And the requirements, and then lock, and a victim can request their locks to be changed. So this is kind of a good, and this is the back page of it. Giving victims ideas, safety plan, communicate with your landlord, do it in writing. And then this is the code on the bottom. So just effective this year. So, kind of working with landlords, working with victims on that. So this is a good thing to keep handy too. And then these are some really helpful resources that I've used. If you wanted to look up some more things, but what's exciting is every one of these publications has sections talking about victims of domestic violence specifically. So, it's a problem. We know it's a problem, but I really do feel like it's a problem that we can actually do some things about. So we're still gonna carry on with some more ideas, but that is just my contact info, and that's my pink Jeep I like to drive around. I was in a bike accident about 4 months ago, and I have a broken leg and a broken arm, and I haven't been able to drive it all summer. Feel sad for me, my advocate friends. So my goal is to get back in my Jeep, drive around. But does anyone have any questions or anything you want to ask about? I can pick you up. I can pick you up. My son did that for me. It was my dad's, and it was black, and then he passed away. My son took it home and said he's gonna fix it for me. And then he said, "What color do you want to paint it?" And I said, "Well, it's black, so paint it black." And when I picked it up, I was okay. He goes, "No, we thought we did something different." So there you go. So sweet. Does anybody have any housing questions? Amen. Right. Let me know. You want to ride?
Yes.
I'm gonna drink it here. They have a broken leg. I'll get there, yeah. Thank you. Anybody having housing? Just, you know, you're gonna be excited to hear from Heather, because she's gonna tie it all in, because I just feel like, if you're like me, you're working with victims, you know housing is an issue, but you might not be looking at your victims as, oh my gosh, they're literally homeless, or they're about to become homeless, they're at risk of being homeless. What can we do for them? If you work in an area that has housing authorities, are they letting you refer people to go to a top of a list, a wait list? Because they're a victim? Yeah, somebody, yeah. If they're in shelter, they could maybe bump them up on the list. Okay, so that kind of makes the victim have to go to, if there's room
Have to go to a shelter that they can't get in.
that they can't get into. Okay. Our housing authorities are not necessarily letting us refer people, but we're working with so many different projects with them, you know, that's helpful. I don't know if you have had experience with emergency housing vouchers. This was a couple of years ago. I was in, I think it was the National Homeless Conference, and someone was talking about all this amazing federal funding that's coming for homelessness. And you know, it's one of those things where you're sitting in your little area and you think, I'll never see it, right? Oh yeah, that sounds nice. I think it was early in the, yeah, Heather's laughing because she knows. I'm like, yeah, whatever. And then all of a sudden, our housing authority calls me up and they say, hey, we're getting these emergency housing vouchers. It's national. They're coming to every state. Our little county is gonna have, well, it was gonna be 80 vouchers between 2 different housing authorities. And you can get people in that are homeless, at risk of being homeless, or fleeing domestic violence. And I was like, what? And their funding was gonna drop in, I think maybe June 1st. And they were gonna let me go ahead and refer some people. So right off the bat, I refer like 20, like boom, I overwhelmed. I was laughing because it was almost funny. I was like, I go, oh, you want a referral? Here you go. Here's a whole load. And one of the first victims that I referred, I just couldn't believe it. It literally, she was about 1 week from becoming homeless, had to leave where she was, 3 kids, working at Walmart, working on her bad credit. What she had done is she had made herself a plan on how to fix her bad credit. It was a long-term plan. She had it written down. She was willing to share that with a landlord so that they would be more favorable toward her. She was still getting turned down. She didn't know where she was going to rent. She was able to obtain, I think it was one of the first emergency housing vouchers, so gave her a Section 8 voucher. She got into a townhouse, increased her hours a little bit at work, was able to fix her credit. It was just amazing. It was that quick. So that program hasn't really renewed, but you know, we still work with that a little bit. So that's the good thing about rubbing shoulders with your housing authority. What do they got? What do they got over there? They got something new? Or because they're always building something. They're gonna build senior housing, they're gonna do this or that. You know, find out what's new. That can be. I'm sorry, was there a question? Yes.
So what would the difference be between rental assistance and emergency housing voucher?
Oh, okay. So our rental assistance is temporary. We can only do like 1 or 2 months of rent with most of our funding, but the housing voucher is longer term. And it would be consistent with your income. So for me to help someone with rental assistance, in my outreach housing program, I don't verify their income, or it doesn't matter to me. I'll give you one example. I had someone that's a nurse. She's an emergency room nurse. She has a good job. She moved in with her boyfriend in our county. He was physically abusive to her. So much so she ended up in the emergency room, and the police officer actually called me from the emergency room and said, hey, She gave up her apartment, she gave up everything to come and live with him, she has nowhere to go, like literally, it's not safe for her, he's at large. And we can't send her back. Well, in her instance, we did like a short hotel stay while we figured things out. And then she had a job, she was able to get a new lease agreement at an apartment complex, but she just needed that first month's rent and deposit, and that's all she needed then to, then continue on. So she couldn't qualify for government assistance, but it's a gap, like I think for all of us in here, if something happened, and you lost your ability to pay rent or your mortgage for one, I mean, it's a problem nowadays, right? Rent is high, mortgages are high, and it's a problem for everyone. So I think that's it. So yes, did that help answer your question?
Yeah,
A little bit.
I think so,
Yeah. So we try with, a lot of our funding sources don't require that we look at income. We did also have some TANF funds, the temporary assistance for needy families. We had that, some, we hope to get that back because that allowed us to help people for up to 4 months. With assistance. Usually we only do 1 or 2 months, and usually the majority of victims, that's what they need, unless they go into long-term housing assistance.
and you still have that program,
Yes.
the vouchers?
Yeah, I don't have the vouchers in my agency, but we connect with the housing authorities that do. Yes,
Okay,
those are the government agencies.
thank you.
They're just our friends. Friends with vouchers, that's funny. That's what you need to find, friends with vouchers, that should have been a slide, okay? Should we take a little break if there's no more questions? Let's take a 10. Oh, Rochelle, generous on her way out, 15. That's the nicest, I've known Rochelle Hill for 15 years, that's the nicest she's ever did. I'm sorry. Yeah. Yep. Okay, 15, everybody.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, I piggybacked this on a Vegas trip with all my friends. And we had lots of fun and basically didn't leave the pool of the place we were staying, so it was amazing. Well, I'm really grateful to be here. I've worked with Holly for a really long time. And not only is she a valued colleague, she's a friend of mine, and she's a hard act to follow. So I'm really grateful that she invited me to come and share with you. And she's a great example of what collaboration looks like, because we work so closely together. It allows for a lot of the collaboration that we have in our community. Okay, $50 and I'll screw this thing up because I'm not so good with the clicker thing. So bear with me. Okay, about me. These are sort of obligatory, aren't they? So my official job title is the collaborative applicant for the Mountainland Continuum of Care. So my counties are Utah County, Summit County, and Wasatch County. Who do we have from Utah, Summit, and Wasatch County? Who got my peeps? Awesome. The rest of you are great too. I just don't know you. So I did my bachelor's at BYU. I did my undergrad in English with the idea of going on to be a college professor and teaching Steinbeck. Super fun. My last semester of college, I had a crush on a boy, as we do. I played in a band, as we do. And we played for a fundraiser at a soup kitchen, as you do, you know. And so it completely derailed my career trajectory. I started working part-time as a receptionist at a soup kitchen, working with homelessness. And all of a sudden, I fell in love with my work. And that has not changed in the last 16 years. When COVID hit, I thought, well, I'm never going to have more free time than I have right now. So I went and got a master's up at Weber State. I did my master's in English literature, again with the idea of going on and being a college professor and teaching a little bit about Steinbeck. But a semester in, they had a certification in technical writing and rhetoric. And I thought, well, what the crap? I like writing, let's do this. And so now I have a master's and I'm a college professor teaching college writing and research, which is kind of crazy, but fantastic. I worked in homeless services for 16 years and I love to sing. I'm no longer in dance. I'm no longer in college, and the boy I had a crush on has 5 kids. It's cool. It's been a while. I love to watch baseball. You can see I went to an A's game before they get run out of town. That's gonna be a thing. And then I run an Instagram account for my godson Kitty, who is fantastic. And there's the obligatory cat picture, because that's the thing that we gotta do, right? He has 7,500 followers on Instagram. Me personally, I have 62. It's good to know your place in this world sometimes. So, really? Wow, okay. So I'm famous now. Okay. That's kind of crazy, actually. If you do follow Orpheus, that's wild. So why am I here? I am here because housing is hard. Right now, rental rates are insane, vacancy rates are insane, and then you add in the barriers of the special needs clients that you're working, and that makes it even harder. And it's harder when you're going it alone. One of the things that I felt pretty immediately when I started working in homeless services, I felt this like massive burden, like it was somehow on me, on my agency to fix all the things. I don't know how many of y'all have ever felt that way, but that is the thing I still struggle with, where it's like I have to fix all the things. But we don't. We can collaborate. And when you get more brains in the room, more mouths at the table of people that are equally passionate and equally committed, it helps to solve some of these unsolvable problems to housing. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. My role in my community, I tell people I'm a problem solver. I like that. It's not entirely true, but it's a great thing to tell people. But what I do is to help agencies collaborate, know where our service gaps are, know when we're duplicating resources, and fill the gaps that we have. And in every community, you guys have a me. So I'm going to tell you how to find your me as we go on. I'm weirder than most of them now, just letting you know. So how many of you guys have ever heard of the continuum of care? Okay, so that's unexpected. Okay, cool. The continuum of care is a federal program that basically corrals all the agencies in your geographic region that are working to end facets of homelessness, whether that's housing, mental health, substance abuse, domestic violence, public housing authorities, etc. So my job, I tell people sometimes it's like herding cats, but it's getting everybody in the same direction, making sure that we're being strategic in the way that we go after resources and money, but that we're also familiar with one another's services so that we can have a better service experience for the people that we're serving. That's a lot of serving in one word or one sentence. So in Utah, we got 3 continuum of care. All y'all are going to be in one of them. Salt Lake County is their own continuum of care. They got their own stuff. They're just sort of self-contained. Mine is Utah, Wasatch, and Summit counties. And then balance of state is everybody else. So if you're not in Salt Lake, you're not in Utah County, Wasatch County, Summit County, you're in the balance of state continuum of care. And because this is a ginormous region with lots of different needs, lots of different populations, it's broken up into local homeless councils. How many of you guys have ever heard of local homeless council? We got 2, okay, 3, okay. So I'm gonna tell you how to find and connect with your local homeless council today. And if you're like me, okay, I have very high functioning anxiety. I have very high anxiety and I function. We can call it whatever. Sometimes emails are like the impossible task. If you want a template email to send to your local homeless council chair, I will make one for you and send it to you. You put your name in and hit send. So if that's your impossible task, sometimes it is for me, I'm very willing to help with a template. I teach writing, I like templates. So let's talk a little more about the continuum of care. got two main purposes. First purpose, we're looking at long-term strategies. So what are we missing in our community? What should the strategy be when we're looking at all of the ways that we can support people experiencing homelessness? And I'm gonna get to y'all in a minute. This is why this is gonna be applicable in just a minute. So we look at what our housing services are, what our case management services are, what our transportation services are, and we sort of brainstorm how we can make those flow in a way that benefits, again, the vulnerable people that we're serving. And then I do a ginormous grant every year on behalf of service agencies in my area. My grant is due next week, so if you want to pray, light candles, I'm very cool with that because, you know, that high functioning anxiety thing again, but this is something that covers the whole state of Utah though. So your local homeless council, they're also freaking out right now writing their grants. So people that participate in the continuum of care, local homeless councils, domestic violence shelters, emergency shelters, housing authorities, hospitals, behavioral health, etc. The idea is to have as many voices at the table to help plan and strategize as possible. And I'll tell you, y'all do unique work with unique needs of survivors. Your voice needs to be at the table, elevating the needs of those survivors. And one of the ways to do that is to connect with your local homeless council. When there are strategy meetings about what funding we're going to get and how we're going to use it, y'all need to be at that table with very, very loud voices, because there's money out there for every single local homeless council. The other thing I talked about doing was this big grant. The refuge works with me quite a bit. And then Peace House also is my region. And we work as a subrecipient there. So both of them I help with some federal funding. The local homeless council model is designed to work on a local level. With again, the understanding that our geographic regions are just too different to have all of the same strategic planning. And so at the table for a local homeless council, as you can see, it's pretty varied. Again, we want every voice representing the population they're serving, because it's really critical when we're talking about how to make a plan that's going to benefit everybody. So what does this mean for y'all? Are you guys sitting here going, I work with survivors, I work with homelessness, like what the crap? Did you know that every single one of you who works with survivors of domestic violence, you are working with 100% homeless population? Under the HUD definition of homelessness, which I have literally copied and pasted from HUD, y'all are working with people that are the homeless category 4. That is people who are fleeing, attempting to flee domestic violence. They have no other residence because of domestic violence, or they lack the resources or support networks to obtain other permanent housing. Okay, brass tacks, I'm like pretty direct, y'all. What this means is there's money out there for the people that you are serving. Not only do your agencies and the people that you are serving qualify for money earmarked for domestic violence survivors, you also qualify for funding earmarked for homeless services. And that is a broader pool of money than just money that's earmarked for domestic violence. And that's really important. This is my little map. I stole it from somebody. If you are in these counties, you can see kind of what color LHC you're in. I'll go to a different one. I copied for you too. So, Bear River Local Homeless Council. If you're in Cache County, Rich, or Box Elder, Logan City, your local homeless council is the Bear River Local Homeless Council. Weber Morgan, if you're in Weber or Morgan, sort of makes sense, you're going to be in the Weber Morgan Local Homeless Council. Davis is Davis County, Clearfield, and Layton. You are going to be in the Davis County Local Homeless Council. Tooele, Grantsville, Tooele, Windover Cities, Tooele Homeless Council. You went to Basin. You went to Duchesne and Daggett counties. If you're in those areas, that's your local homeless council. 6th County is Juab, Sevier, Paiute, Millard. This is like a vocabulary test. San Pete and Wayne. y'all are in 6th County. Iron County is Beaver, Iron, Garfield, and Kane. Washington County is St. George. We're in Washington, LHC. Hardin Emery is in Hardin Emery. Grand County in Moab, and then San Juan, LHC is San Juan, Blanding, Monticello. So now that you know which local homeless council you're in, did you have a question?
I did.
Huh?
I actually had a question about the statement you made prior to the off.
Mhm.
If we have domestic violence victims, that they really qualify under definition of homeless.
Yeah.
But does that mean they have to be in shelter and not living in their home, or can they be in their home and still be in service?
If they are attempting to flee, or if they're displaced because of domestic violence, that counts as the homeless definition. Or if they lack the resources to become housed in another permanent location, they meet that HUD definition of homeless. Great question. Okay. I told you guys I wasn't going to stop. I'm hitting buttons. I don't know what I did. I broke it.
No,
This was inevitable all the time.
no, because I
Inevitable.
moved the captioning. And
Thank you.
I do not.
Okay. So here's some points of contact, and we're gonna go to this website here too. If you are located in Salt Lake County, your local homeless council representatives are Jen Campbell and also Sean McMillan. They're fireballs. You'll like working with them. I like working with fireballs. If you are in Mountain Land, Utah, Summit, or Wasatch County, you got me. I'm your person. If you are in Balance Estates, again, anywhere else, okay, I'm gonna mess this up. Can you help me again? I'm sorry. Going to the website that we just went to. Oh, it did work. Okay. Okay, I'm sorry. Thank you. So I put a website in here. It is endutahhomelessness.org. And this takes you right to a website that's going to show you all the contact information for your local homeless councils. So who's the chair, who's on the board, who's your point of contact, who's your point in time count lead. We're going to talk about point in time. It's going to give you all of the information about how to get connected with the local services that are happening. Because again, your voice needs to be at the table. Another thing to explore here a little bit, this is something I really love. So if you go to the Balance Estate tab, you have committees, you've got etc. That's a really great way to look at agendas and items going on. You go to the Get Help tab right here. Let's see. This is going to tell you the resources in your community that are wrapping services around homelessness, and therefore are services that people in your community experiencing domestic violence might be able to access. This is another great way to get connected into what is already happening in your community, so that when it comes time for advocacy, when it comes time to talk about money, you're already at the table and you're connected. Okay, see if I can find my slides. Okay. So why is participation important? Okay, again, I'm a real direct person. I'm in love with y'all. We are all understaffed and we are all overworked. Capacity is a real thing. I know that this is a real thing right now. I'm feeling it. I know y'all are feeling it. Agencies are feeling it. We are stretched to the limit with the things that we have to do. However, knowing this, I'm still going to tell you that it's really critical to get involved. And here's some reasons why. More funding opportunity. I mean, there is money that is out there for homeless services that can work for your organization, that can work for, again, the survivors that you're working with. If you are not at the table and if you are not bringing your needs forward, then people making those funding decisions do not know that you need that money. They don't know how you're going to spend it. And more than that, they're not in a position to be able to advocate for you when those funding streams start coming down the pipeline. More advocacy opportunities. If you're connected in with the services in your community, they're connected in with you also by collaborating in that way. You're able to procure things like warm handoffs for the people that you're serving. You're able to put people in the pipeline to housing that they may qualify for. I know one of the things in our community right now, we've been looking for people over 62 for a new housing opportunity that's come up. Because of the collaborations that we have with the Refuge and with other organizations, we've been able to send people that qualify for those specific housing opportunities and put them in a very quick pipeline to housing. Greater potential for partnerships. You're ensuring fewer duplication of services in a region. Money is tight. If I'm doing something really well, then I don't need to have another agency start doing that. If another agency is doing something really well, I'm going to throw my support by them instead of like reinventing the wheel. It gives you the ability to quickly identify and address service gaps in the community with discussions and collaborations. One of the things I think that Holly touched on was the transportation issue. And I mean, that is a thing. But with collaboration and discussion, they were able to form a partnership with the Mountain Land Association of Government that handles all of those passes and monthly bus things. So that opened a door to solve a problem that we didn't all know that we had. And this gives you an opportunity again to sort of be problem solvers. And then, okay, how many of y'all do grants? How many of y'all have to do with grants? Yeah, we know that narrative is great, but data is king. When you collaborate with your communities, you're sharing your data points, they're sharing their data points, and that gives you stronger applications for funding, stronger applications for talking with your city, your county, and the state about what's going on in your community. And it gives you a really much stronger place to start talking about what the unmet needs are in the community. Okay, how to partner. Give input. I like people that are fireballs. So when you come to the table, come with the intent of educating, but more than that, expressing what your needs are. This is the thing that I love about my geographic area, is that we talk so openly about what the needs are, not just what the unmet need is for the clients we're serving, but I know the Refuge's talking points about turnaway numbers. How do I know that? They're always at the table. They come in and say, these are our turnaways in the last year, and this is what we want to do with that. And because of that, we've been able to have discussions about bringing in additional rental assistance and building a new shelter, because we all know there's talking points. Create advocates by expressing your needs. I'm going to talk about some real world examples on this, because there's some really cool things that we've done. Offer to do trainings for your COC or your local homeless council. I've worked with nonprofits a long time. We're really good at some things, but trauma-informed training is not one of them typically. Every single local homeless council needs trauma-informed training. Y'all are good at that. That is something that you can bring in and offer as a way to support the services and the efforts going on locally are. We have the Refuge do annual trainings for us, for all of our service agencies on trauma-informed practices, because it's just not something that a soup kitchen or a food bank is going to have access to regularly. And we want to make sure that we're doing it right. It matters the way that we approach people that are vulnerable. If you do not have a public housing authority in your area, there are other agencies you can work with for outside the box solutions for housing. But our public housing authorities are kind of kick butt. They are really interested in looking at these solutions and partnering. One of the things that I love that Holly talked about, she's like, when the emergency housing vouchers opened, she sent them 20. On the back end of this, Purple City Housing Authority was number 6 in the nation for filling all of their housing vouchers like quickly. They had this mess done by like the end of June. We got a whole big email about how we met something. They got an award. It was cool, but we filled those suckers real fast because we were all collaborating already. We didn't have to create a new process for referral. And then being aware of the funding sources and opportunities is a great way to use these connections. Another real world example, 2 members of my local homeless council executive committee were recently on a funding allocation committee with Provo City. They had extra money. What the heck, right? They had extra money. And so the discussion at the table was, who can we give this to that has need and that we know will use it? Well, Refuge got more money than they asked for because they had advocates at the table who knew their needs and knew their history, and that if they were given additional funding, they would absolutely be able to use it. And then participate in local activities such as point time count. I'll talk to you guys about point time count. So Holly, I'm gonna piggyback, if you don't mind, a little on this. She shared a little about the land purchase in Orem, but let me tell you about the back end of this. So we weren't sure how Orem City was gonna feel about the zoning. I mean, NIMBY is a real thing. They had advocates that talked to the city council. What the local homeless council, so what our COC was able to do, we went to the state. We said, hey, are there financial incentives for the city of Orem to host a homeless shelter, domestic violence shelter here? Turns out there's big ones. So every single city of a certain size in Utah pays into something called the Homeless Shelter City Mitigation Fund. Every city pays into it. So it's just a gigantic pot of money that goes to help with defraying costs of cities that will host a shelter of some sort. So we were able to go and talk to the contact's office that works with the Homeless Mitigation Fund and say, hey, so if Orem hosts this and we have this many beds, what does that mean for the city? Turns out it's about $500,000 a year. So that is a good way to use some collaboration. That's enough money to get over a little NIMBY. So it's funny, I haven't found a dollar, not yet exactly. We're still looking at what the overcome NIMBY dollar amount is, but that was enough to help grease some of those wheels with getting that land zoning. Then I just talked about the rental assistance through Provo's program. We were able to get them funded at above ask because people knew their needs and their history in expanding that funding. And then the partnership between the Refuge and Provo City Housing Authority. Holly talked to you a little about the 16 2-bedroom units. So what happened behind the scenes, the Housing Authority reached out to the local homeless council, said, hey, there's this funding thing coming up. What are the needs in our community? We talked about the needs for the refuge. We talked about additional permanent housing needs. And they said, well, this funding is pretty specific to homelessness. So we did our homework. And again, that HUD definition of homelessness meets that domestic violence criteria. And so the back end of that was reassuring the housing authorities that if they applied for this funding, number one, we would all write letters of support and help prioritize it. But 2, that the funding that they did in conjunction with the refuge would be eligible for this program. So they were able to get the entire project funded through a deeply affordable housing grant that came out of the state legislature. And then COC NOFA grant. This is the one I'm working on right now, the Pray For Me grant. 2 nights ago, I was working with their grant writer, and he's like, I don't know how to make this fit. And I was like, but what about this program that you're doing? Can we write this for this? He's like, yeah, I think that would work. Because I know the programs, because Holly is at the table, because the refuge is at the table, I had a quick call with the grant writer, and we're going in a little different direction because we were able to make that meet the grant requirements. So there's a lot of advantages to coming to the table. Point time count. Okay, this is the beast. This is my other big project every year, y'all. Point time count is our annual homeless census. HUD sets the date. Y'all, Park City's super fun because they always set the 10-day window during Sundance Film Festival. You have not lived until you've knocked on car windows and found drunken celebrities inside. Super fun, love it. But we get a year-to-year snapshot of what homelessness looks like in our community. Now, for y'all working with domestic violence, you're on the sheltered end of homelessness, so you don't have to do the count, you don't have to do that kind of stuff. But there's value in working with your local homeless council to make those connections, and more than that, to help ensure that you have trauma-informed practices in contacting vulnerable populations. And I'll tell you, we've already started planning. I've had 2 point in time count planning meetings already. And our next point in time count is January the 24th. As you go to that Balance Estate or Salt Lake website, I promise you, if you email the point in time count lead that you want to help, they will cry because we never help enough people. But this is a good opportunity to sort of rub shoulders with people in your community, again, equally passionate about helping serve vulnerable populations. So some action steps, and then we're going to open it up. Holly and I are going to open up the discussion, troubleshooting, clarifications, problem solving, because I do like problem solving. But here's some action steps for you. Every time I go to a conference, I get really energized and enthused, and then I sort of lose the momentum in the next few days. So here's some steps you can take. Number 1, look up your LHC point of contact. That is utahhomelessness.org. That's going to give you a whole list of contacts, and you can sort through who's the contact point for your area. Send an email introducing yourself and asking to be involved in LHC. And again, like I said, if this is, okay. I don't know what I did. I'm so sorry. I am like technology repellent. It's a little on the wild end. What I was saying is, if you get stuck with this email is your sort of dead zone, impossible task, I have my cards right here. You can send me an email that says help, and I will send you an email template to send out to people, so you don't even have to write it. Or you can go to ChatGPT, but as writers, we don't tell people that. The next step on the action item is to look up your point in time count representative and send her or him an email that you would like more information. You don't even have to commit to participating right now, but just tell them that you would like more information, and maybe you'd like to help plan it. Maybe you'd like to help provide some trauma-informed practices for them as they're going out and contacting people at 4 in the morning and asking about homeless status. That's really fun. And again, if you get stuck on an email, let me know. Happy to write you a template. And then this is the other thing that I'd like you to do as an action step. Take some time on this End Utah Homelessness website. Look at some of the organizations that you don't know that are providing services in your area and shoot them an email. And this is my patented secret weapon. Take them for Mexican food, okay? I swear I have eaten my body weight in chips and salsa in the last 5 years, but it is a great way to make connections. Also, nobody can take themselves too seriously while you're eating chips and salsa. I don't know why, it's just a thing. But this is a great way to connect with people that are already working in your area that you don't know. Maybe you would like to talk about a partnership. Maybe you just want to learn what they're doing or how to connect people that you're serving to the services that they're offering. So those are your action items. I'm so scared to touch this thing. I'm going to break it again. Okay. Do we have any questions? Yeah. Yeah, definitely. All really wishing.
I just thought of something to add. So I had never heard of point in time counts before I started my housing project. And it's been enlightening for me to, I've been out, so you go out with some other crew of volunteers. I had some students with me, and you're trying to count homeless people, but it was very humbling also to see who was homeless in my neighborhood, in my shopping centers by my house, things like that. And so I would highly recommend getting involved in that. And then when I started our housing program, I started coming to the COC meetings. And at first I thought, why am I doing that? That's useless. Why would I do that? And when I sat down, because we were in person back then, I looked at the table, a huge table, and I said, oh my gosh, that's every single agency a domestic violence provider would want to talk to are sitting at this table for a variety of reasons. There was emergency, the food, like let's see, I'm trying to think, community action, like the food bank, emergency services, they're sitting there. There's mental health providers. And it was all the people you want to know about regardless. So those are really excellent ways to volunteer. And then here's something that we're doing that we didn't mention, but our homeless coordinating council is going to have an event in November that's going to be very cool. We're gonna have it at a park, and we're working on planning to invite some, you know, prominent citizens, maybe, hopefully we're gonna get politicians. Who else are we gonna get? Maybe police chief or something, and they're gonna pose as a homeless person for the night. And we're gonna run them through some scenarios of how it would be, right? So our committee is working, but guess what? I'm on the committee, and so we got these, you know, 6 different scenarios. Okay, here's a single guy, and you know, he's maybe, I don't know, a veteran or something. He's had PTSD, he's become homeless, you know, so you would be this person. But guess what? I got to interject and say, let's do a scenario about what does a domestic violence victim look like, or survivor that is now homeless. And I said, she's suddenly become homeless. She has 3 kids. She has a minivan, but she don't have any gas. So she's gonna park behind a shopping center because guess what? That's where she knows that could be a lit place that might be safe for her. She doesn't know what to do. So because I am volunteering on that committee, then I get to advocate a little bit for domestic violence survivors and count them as the face of homelessness. So those are some just things that I've learned that are amazing. And sometime I hope you hear about our amazing event, because we hope it's amazing. We're still working on it, but we hope it to be amazing. So I'm just saying it's interesting to interject domestic violence survivors into some of the things that traditionally aren't talked about with us.
Interjecting too much.
Yeah, that's great. And that reminds me too, in our last point in time count, we found for Utah County, a full third of the people that we contacted who were homeless indicated that they were experiencing homelessness due to an episode of domestic violence. And that's a little wild. But if you jump on that End Utah Homelessness website, you can look and see what the homelessness rates look like in your community and what percentage of them indicated that they were homeless because of domestic violence.
You know, that's a good stat you could use in grants, other grants that you're writing too. So it's a good one to have.
Yeah, unmet need.
Yeah, did you have any questions? Like, did I take it away from you?
I don't know.
Sorry. I don't know what time it is.
I don't know what time it is.
Oh, so. Yeah, other things you would want to talk about? Those are the things I was thinking about. Yeah. Okay, I wanted to say this too. This is, like I said, it's just opened my eyes on homelessness, the intersection between domestic violence and homelessness, really, because I just really hadn't thought of it. But I looked for things that would relate to victims, and I was just watching America's Got Talent. Anybody watching it? I don't. I watch it. So. But there's a group on there this season called Freedom Singers, and they're people that are they're unhoused. And I was gonna ask Heather, that's a nice, or is that not nice, but is that a proper way to talk about sometimes I want to make sure I have the right terminology, but I thought that was a good way to explain it. So they've been unhoused, and they were a phenomenal act, a singing group. And this one man said, I had to rewind it and write it down because I really liked what he said. He said, this is what he wants America to know. Don't look away. Society is better when everyone is housed. And then he said this, art doesn't have an address because they're singing, but I was also thinking humanity doesn't have an address either. So we all are, this is all of us. It's a problem for everyone, but I do think when we come as domestic violence providers to these tables, you will be amazed. And we are really here to help anyone. If you want more info or call us or email us, we would be glad to help you.
We're good.
Absolutely. And if you need help connecting with your local resources, again, got a stack of my cards up here. I'm very happy.
To help you get connected. I'm madly technology repellent. It's a little something. I don't even know how that is a
We
thing
need to
that
give a
happens.
shout out to the online people. They have any questions? I guess they'll tell you if they do.
I think it's a good.
Okay, and I'm gonna kill it again, right? Just, it's gonna be a thing. Do we have any online questions? Okay,
I have
yes.
so you were talking about this, I can't remember exactly what you called it, but it was like, the homeless shelter mitigation fund that every city pays into. That should they, like, for example, in Orem, if they were to start, it's not a proper shelter, property that would be used towards homelessness, that they would then receive a credit or.
There's an allocation depending on how many beds are available. And that is the thing I think maybe I kind of glossed over in my caffeine days today. Homeless shelters are not the only applicable use of that. Domestic violence shelters that run 7 nights a week and have intakes every night also qualify for this homeless shelter city mitigation fund. And what that means is if the shelter, domestic violence shelter is a certain size, they'll get a direct allocation of money from that big pot. And if it's a specific size, which is I believe over 80 beds, permanent beds year round, excuse me, they also stop paying into that fund. So the size that we're looking to build in Orem, they will stop paying into that fund and get the allocation from that fund. That's pretty critical. Another thing that I didn't touch on, I think is worth hitting, is that regardless of what local funding you have in your community that is centered around homelessness, March, April every year, there's state homelessness funding that is released. And these applications are collaborative with your local homeless council. So, for example, in mine, I call together everybody that wants to apply for it. We have this big meeting and say, hey, we're gonna get about this much money. What do we need? What's missing in our community? What's underfunded in our community? What can we do with this money? And I tell people we just carve it up like a turkey, and that's kind of what we do. But there are ways that you can work with your local homeless council to help get your organization connected with this funding source. The next state homelessness funding is going to be released March or April, but they're doing 3-year contracts. So funding that is awarded this year will also be renewed for the 3-year cycle, which as you're building program capacity, obviously that's a really good thing because you know that that money is coming in for at least 3 years, and that lets you have a little bit more decision-making about how you want to use that money. So I know that it's going to be a highly collaborative process this year. My opinion is that almost every time it's better to collaborate than compete. We get our needs met, particularly with limited funding, in better ways if we collaborate and talk about, again, how we're going to carve up that turkey. But another great reason to connect with your local homeless council. If you start getting connected with them now, by the time this request for proposals comes out in March or April, they can have an idea of what your needs are, what your project plans are, what your staffing looks like. And again, have these conversations about what's missing in your community as you're really looking at building a systemic response to whatever it is that you're experiencing in your community. There are local award funding that you can get on a city and a county level. Community development block grants are available. You can usually work with your local homeless council on what that money looks like. When it comes to strings, local funding is always your lowest strings attached. State funding, higher strings attached. Federal funding, lots of strings attached. But there are funding sources out there, again, to support agencies working with domestic violence, but also to help programs supporting people that are experiencing domestic violence, such as that rental assistance program that Holly was talking about. You can really get creative in your partnerships about how you want to use this in a systemic way. and your LHC is a great place to start. So if there are any other questions, I don't know if I or just talked too fast. I don't know, it could go either way. But any other questions or problems that you have in your community that we could troubleshoot as a group? Wonderful. I think that's all I have. Holly, do you have anything else to share? Okay, I think that's all that I have.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think that was really beneficial, and I love, like I was saying, I would like to clone you for reals. Because I love that saying of that collaboration and not compete, and I think sometimes we operate in the scarcity world and we get really nervous about who's doing what and what we can't do. And I think we're always stronger when we can collaborate together. So thank you so much, thank you for being here. I don't think anyone minds leaving ending early. So with that, thank you all for being here.